Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Rosen Rubini podcast, Making Sense of This World. My name is Manas Chavla, and as always, I'm really pleased to be joined by CEO and Head of Research, Brunello Rosa. Brunello, this week we're talking about Iran and the Islamic Republic that might still be intact and its nuclear facility still operational. A big question was this nuclear strike on the Fordow facility, which was, allegedly housing lots of this sort of enriched uranium under buried hundreds of feet under a mountain. And the US struck this facility after much anticipation. What do we know about it in the aftermath? What is the likelihood that this uranium has actually been destroyed, and what follows from here?
It's actually quite difficult to know for certainty because, with certainty, because if you had normal relationship with this counterparty, as the AEA used to have, you can actually ask to verify the facilities. But after the bombing, clearly they are granting access to no one, and they have effectively broken the relationship with them. UN agency as well. So now you have to rely effectively on satellite images and intelligence that you can somehow get on the ground, which is, of course, even more difficult than before. So what we know is that the US has dropped a series of MOP, this massive ordnance penetrators bomb, especially on Fordo, and a series of Tomahawks on Isfahan, because apparently that didn't require to go underground as much. The point is, while Trump was saying that these facilities have been obliterated and all the nuclear plan of Iran has been brought back to zero, in reality, it's possible that in reality, some reports came out from the US intelligence itself saying that, in fact, those facilities might still be somehow, if not intact, badly damaged, but seen somehow repairable and potentially operational within months. And this is the same thing that in a recent interview, Rafael Grossi, the head of the AA, also said, and that was reinforced finally by some intelligence by European services. So, there is some consensus that those facilities have been damaged but not obliterated.
Yeah. And, like you pointed out in the views letter, it seems like the truth lies somewhere in the middle. What does all of this say about the possibility of regime change? We saw this being floated as one of the potential goals, particularly of Netanyahu, of Israel, maybe lesser so of the United States. Uh, how does this change the calculus for regime change?
Well, it changed quite a lot. So first of all, these facilities might still be operational. These 400 kilos of enriched uranium never been found, and God knows whether they are and whether they will be found. Now, there's a school of thought that says even if the program has not been stopped but just pushed back and those facilities are not being obliterated but just badly damaged, the signal is so strong that if Iran start to rebuild those, Israel and the US can strike again. So it's like a preemptive move to say, yes, you might still be alive somehow, but I can kill you anytime. So be careful what you do. So, given the premises, our view was that if the US got involved in the conflict, the possibility of regime change would be much lower for the very simple reason that if you use the famous phrase by um, Colin Powell, you break it, you own it. Once the US has put some military equipment on the ground, whether it's boots from soldiers or bombs, then they had to take responsibility for what happens afterwards. So the US has kind of stopped short of going beyond the bombing. Trump himself entertained the idea of regime change. He said, oh, what's so bad about regime change if a better regime can emerge? Until people told him, look, you're going to spend a few $1 trillion here for the next 20, 25 years to build something that is somehow strong and resilient enough after the collapse of a very well established regime such as the Islamic Republic. So, um, given all this, Trump gave up the idea of regime change. Netanyahu also realized that the US have gone way beyond what they expected just a few weeks ago. So everybody now is more in a position of saying, look, uh, uranium enriching facilities have been damaged, maybe not destroyed, but have been damaged. The regime has been massively weakened. The foreign minister of Iran flew to Moscow, hoping to involve Russia. Russia says something. I have other problems to solve myself, including Ukraine and whatever not. I can act diplomatically on your behalf and convince, first of all, you not to retaliate too much, and the US and the Israelis not to continue, but don't ask me more than that. And so this means that effectively the Islamic Republic is still in place, massively weakened, but without a serious option for what comes next, very hard for the Islamic Republic to go anytime soon.
Yeah. And as you pointed out in your newsletter, that history shows that the regimes that don't possess the nuclear bomb and only rely on other countries' umbrellas, like Libya, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, all end up in a sense of sort of geopolitical turmoil for decades after. And chief example being Ukraine, which is why perhaps this sort of imperative for getting the bomb is so strong for Iran. I remember in one of our last newsletters, you framed it as effectively a hope for survival for the regime. So
Absolutely. In particular, I would say that um, the Ukraine maybe is the best example of all. In 1994, they gave up all their nuclear weapons as part of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, Non-Nuclear Proliferation Treaty, and relying on this so famous now security guarantees by Russia, forget about, and then US and UK. And guess what? Without nuclear weapons, those security guarantees, when they were called, they were partly utilized, but things change over time. Russia, of course, changes view. The US provided support, the UK has provided support, but you see now the US kind of pulling out. So, unfortunately, history teaches us that dictators do want their bomb because it's the only guarantee of their survival. Think about Kim Jong Un in North Korea. So Iran should have all the incentives not to restart the program. Guess what? I think they will restart because it's the only way they can actually survive in the longer run.
yeah, absolutely. So something, of course, that seems like will, come back to the fore possibly sooner than later, and we'll continue to watch for the weeks ahead. As always, Brunello, thank you so much for your time and insights.
Thank you very much, Manas. Until next time.